Surface-to-air missiles will be mounted on the roofs of flats. Helicopter gunships with snipers will hover overhead. There'll be more British troops on the streets of London than in Afghanistan. Is Britain under attack? Are we at war again? No, it's just the Olympic Games. Hello and welcome to A Simple Question with me, Phil Rees. The spirit of the Olympics is meant to bring people together to produce a better and more peaceful world. So how does London in lockdown contribute to the lofty ideals of the Olympics? And will it actually make people any safer? Well, before we find out what the public thinks here on the streets of London, here's a short video clip.
As the spotlight of world sports turns to London between July 27th and August 12th, the scale and cost of the security effort is increasing dramatically. With the required numbers of security staff more than doubling in the last year, estimates of the Games' immediate security costs have doubled from £282 million to £553 million. These figures are likely to end up much higher. One survey suggests that the estimate of the final cost could escalate to £1.4 billion. Olympics organisers have announced that the multinational security firm G4S will provide 23,700 personnel, including volunteers and military, as part of a £200 million contract to provide guards at venues across London. 13,500 servicemen will be deployed to the streets, the largest mobilisation of military and security forces seen in the UK since the Second World War. An amphibious assault ship, the HMS Ocean, will be berthed at Greenwich with 800 soldiers or Royal Marines, 4 Lynx helicopters and sniper teams. 4 RAF Typhoon Eurofighters will patrol the skies and shoot down any suspicious aircraft. Starstreak high-velocity missile systems will be on tower blocks in East London, and laser-guided Rapier TOW missile batteries will be set up in numerous sites across London, including Blackheath Common and Lee Valley Reservoir. In addition, many of the security measures are shrouded in secrecy. There are worries that the militarization of the London Games will turn Britain into a virtual police state, as much of the effort is directed at preventing legitimate protest. London is also being wired up with a new range of scanners, biometric ID cards, number plate and facial recognition CCTV systems, police control centres and checkpoints. Many such systems, installed using vast security budgets and relatively little scrutiny, are designed to remain long after the athletes have left. What's more, the Home Office is pushing to pass an emergency anti-terrorist bill through Parliament before the Olympics, which will give police the permanent right to stop and search anyone in London who they suspect could be connected to terrorism. This is despite the ruling of the European Court of Human Rights in January, which judged previous stop-and-search legislation illegal. There are growing concerns that the proposed security measures are not only excessive but will instigate uncalled-for fear and paranoia, while simultaneously detracting from the spirit of international sportsmanship that the event is meant to embrace.
A Simple Question is a show that finds out what the public thinks here on the streets of London. I began today by asking people what they know about the plan to militarize London for the Olympics. Is the threat of attack real, or is the government simply playing the politics of fear?
Well, I mean, I've heard bits and pieces about, sort of particularly around Greenwich and the area, or over in the east, where it's going to be. They're going to have these like missile launches and things like that. I don't know how much that's been exaggerated, but that's what I've heard. I guess it's a good thing, but I don't know if I'd be so happy if I lived around that area.
What do you know about the plan to bring troops on the streets of London and to militarize the situation during the Olympics?
I don't know anything about the troops on the streets, but I've seen the things about the missile launches on top of buildings, which I think is a bit extreme and over the top. It's more of a, I've got a bigger weapon than yours.
I hear helicopters going over, where I live in South East London, so you notice that's got more in the last couple of months. So there's obviously something going on.
I don't know too much. I know that in the Mile End Quarter they're going to put rocket launchers supposedly on the old Brighton and May factory, and then have some super ship in the Thames and that kind of stuff.
What do you know about the plans to bring lots of troops to sort of militarise London for the extent of the Olympics?
I think it's overstretched. I think somebody's mentioned a story to say what's going to happen, or they predict what might happen. I mean, it's multi-million-pound business that we're putting up here.
The most I know is just what I've seen today along Buckingham Palace Road, the road that goes straight into Buckingham Palace, and all the security gates and things like that, and close the traffic, and that's about the extent of what I know.
Do you think that the terror threat is real, or do you think maybe they are sort of the increased security is likely to actually generate sort of fear amongst people?
I can see that. I mean, it probably would generate fear, but I think they probably need to do it.
I think that it's already created a certain amount of anxiety, certainly in the households where the missiles are planted. And I think that there is certainly a very strong emphasis on security. I suspect that for some it could be a source of anxiety, yeah.
I think that the more you see police and the more you see guns, the scarier you become, as opposed to just sort of going about your daily life.
I think probably in the end it's probably more generating fear than actually preventing anything, so yeah.
So you don't think the terror threat is real, or certainly do you think it's overplayed? And might it generate just more fear amongst people?
I think it's there to create the fear and to make them appear like they have control over the situation, but they don't. It wouldn't surprise me if there's a couple of alleged plots foiled just beforehand to try and give the impression that they're doing something. But again, you'll probably find out that there's some kind of undercover person working for MI5, MI6 who's actually helping organise it anyway.
I think the latter. I think it's more likely to generate fear. But I dare say there is a small risk, and obviously you want people to err on the side of caution.
Well, those are the views of people here on the streets of London. Let's now find out what our experts have to say.
I feel militarisation is quite closely related to privatisation and closely linked to an increase in security measures. So I'd say the use of electric fences around a huge area of the Olympic Park at the beginning of privatising a space, enclosing it and making it what they call a sterile zone, so that automatically the public are seen as a threat and something to be kept out rather than that area actually belonging to them. I think it's very difficult to know what the actual level of threat posed is, because it seems to me that it's very much in our government's interests to legislate in a particular way over individuals. And so what you see in the pretext of terrorist threat in America and here and elsewhere is that the state are then able to use the perceived threat to limit and take away hard-won civil liberties. I actually found out that only 2% of the funds being used for the Olympics were private funds and 98% were public. And yet corporations are making a huge profit from the Olympic Games, including the contractors who are putting up this monstrosity, which is so detrimental to the community. They've enriched themselves at our expense, and that's happening on a grand scale. And if you look at the way that the Olympic Games has been affected, the way that the tickets have been allocated, actually the vast majority of people, what they face as a result of the Olympic Games is less areas in which to exercise, in which to be free. In some cases people have lost their homes, and then if they have actually managed to get tickets, they're paying an extraordinary amount to therefore buy a few corporate brands who are heavily subsidised by us in that case, because that's a huge multinational platform in which for them to sell their products.
Obviously, we'd hate to see a terrorist attack at the Olympics, or a terrorist attack at all anywhere. But I have to think that it is extremely unlikely. There doesn't seem to be... and if terrorists wanted to carry out a random attack, then they would probably be doing it somewhere else, where the security isn't. I mean, I suppose if you're looking at the British example of a big event, in 2005, during the G8 that was held in Scotland in Gleneagles, a large amount of the Metropolitan Police was shipped up to Scotland, and there was a terrorist attack on the Tube in London. So in terms of actually preventing terrorism, this kind of security is absolutely useless. What prevents terrorism is, in the last resort, actually intelligence on what terrorist activities are being planned. But a bigger step would be to not provoke people throughout the world by bombing them and generally giving them a hard time. And then there might not be so many people who want to carry out these sorts of attacks. What a lot of people think about the Olympics in East London, at least, is that it is a complete waste of time and their money. But more than just wasting their money, it has loads of social impact on how their lives are regulated and controlled. The joke about the Olympics is it's the only time the drug dealers move into town and the house prices go up. It's a disaster for local people in the East End, but quite an advantage for the richer people who are using it as a motive for making profit out of an enormous number of scams and backhand schemes.
The UK's public spending watchdog has warned that the overall cost of the Games could exceed £11 billion. Now that's £2 billion more than an inflated recent estimate. At the beginning it was only meant to be a few billion pounds. So should public taxes be used to pay for the Olympics, including all the security associated with it? Let's find out what the public thinks about that.
I don't think we should have the Olympics here in the first place. It's the worst thing that's happened in this country since the Luftwaffe.
What do you think about public taxes being used to pay for the Olympics? The total cost now could be excess of £11 billion, and you know, the huge security costs. I mean, is it right?
Hard to say, really. I mean, I guess not. I mean, they've gone a lot over budget, haven't they? But I don't know, we're in for it now. Everybody wanted it at the start, and it was never going to cost as little as they expected to at the start anyway, so I guess we're sort of get what we, I don't know, what we bargained for, really.
I definitely think they should, if it's going to come out of civilian taxes, I think that they should make it the benefits far more long-term and sustainable, and everyone, not for the elite. Yeah, I think it's a bit of a short-term kind of gain for a small minority, so yeah, I don't think it's right.
The answer is the Olympics should have been open as it was in Greece, and there should be no security whatsoever. Any Tom, Dick and Harry should be allowed to turn up without any passes, and the money should have been made out of the television and not out of the people.
The military are going to install surface-to-air missiles in flats in parts of London. Do you think, and also there are going to be sort of ground-air missiles in Blackheath Common and, you know, Lee Valley. I mean, do you think this is a bit over the top?
It does sound a bit over the top, I'll give you that, but I mean, I wasn't actually aware that they were going to that extent, but I guess it makes you feel that they're prepared. I mean, if anybody's going to make an attack, I guess you do feel kind of safe, really.
Yeah. Missiles on roofs, really?
I mean, it sounds a bit bizarre, really, to do that. I think it seems to be leading to a sense that, you know, once they've established these sort of methods, you know, that perhaps it's going to be permanent.
It sounds like it. I don't think I'd be comfortable having a missile on the top of my house, or, in fact, having one that could be used in a obviously very residential public area.
They're going to put surface-to-air missile launchers on some flats in East London and in certain parks. I mean, you know, some people think that really is over the top. I mean, would you agree as a former soldier?
Yeah, I think that's stupid, because I mean, they've got an aircraft carrier sitting in the Thames there that could deal with any missile attack, because they could fire missiles off that, you see, but not actually. I mean, some people will have a field if they get a hold of them, won't they? Sitting on a roof, you know. I mean, it'll be very well guarded, but nah, I think that's scaremongering to a high degree, you know.
I do think it's going too far. It seems like, you know, a story out of a science fiction novel, and that the missiles really could be used just as well by the people wanting to do damage as those wanting to do good. So it seems quite dangerous, actually.
It does seem excessive to me. I mean, if there is this kind of threat, I guess they have to kind of take these precautions, but it seemed quite excessive to me to have missiles launching off top of buildings and things, because it's only going to, I don't really understand the concept either, sure that's just going to drop the aeroplane out of the sky or whatever, so it doesn't necessarily help the situation anyway.
Different views there from the public. Well, let's now find out what our experts have to say.
Missiles on buildings, I think, is a huge extreme. I think years ago, just maybe 2 or 3 years ago, if you'd said they'll be installing missiles on residential buildings for the Olympics, I don't think anyone would have believed you. But now it's happening. And I'd like to know what they intend to do with these missiles. If they do intend to use them, where is the missile going to be launched to that is not going to cause hundreds, if not thousands, of deaths? There's something that Mike Wells of Games Monitor said to me a couple of months back, and this was actually before he was jailed for filming on this site here. And he said to me, this is a security event with some sport thrown in. And I believe that sums it up very neatly and concisely exactly what this is about. This seems to be about militarising our society and trying to get us used to meeting police and army on our streets and them controlling our movements and suspending our civil liberties if and when they deem appropriate. And that's not the type of society I want to live in. And actually, I don't think that society will prevent violence. I think that sort of society will escalate violence.
I think we go to the overview of what this militarisation of the Olympics will entail for ordinary Londoners. A huge amount of inconvenience is the first and most noticeable effect. A great deal of harassment for young people, ethnic minorities, and the potential to give out a signal to people that we have become the sort of society that is scared and frightened rather than an open and welcoming one. And exactly the opposite message of what the traditional Olympic Games is about. An opportunity for international cooperation and peace between different peoples. And so we've actually ended up getting something like the Olympics that should be a festival of peace and unity, and turned it into something that is both self-serving for the financial elites of the world and repressive and oppressive to the ordinary working people of London. As Donald Rumsfeld would say, there's what we know, there's known unknowns and unknown unknowns. What we can see and what everyone can see is this massive public having a destroyer sitting in the Thames, having missile banks on top of housing blocks, the vast number of extra police drafted in from across the country, many of whom will be armed, and if that wasn't enough, that's supplemented by the army as well. So that's the obvious side, but then there's lots of things that we don't know about, but we can pretty much guess that the involvement of the secret services, the involvement of special branch in monitoring local communities, the other agencies, of which there are many of the border control agencies, doing research into. And then there are things that we just don't know about, and that we can't say. But what comes of it is an overall impact on the community, that they are now living in a, it sounds weird to say these days, 1984 type world where everyone is watched. But no one could have then imagined what CCTV on every street monitoring people's every reaction would be like.
The Home Office wants to push through another anti-terror bill before the Olympics. It will reinstate stop and search powers, which were judged to be illegal by the European Court of Human Rights earlier this year. So is the government using the Olympics as cover to bring in laws that will restrict our civil liberties? And what will be the effect of London, of it becoming a city under military lockdown? Let's find out what the public thinks.
You're going into some kind of Stalin style sort of, everyone's losing their freedom. No, it shouldn't be, no, definitely not.
The government is bringing in new laws, sort of anti-terror laws, under cover of the Olympics. Certainly one that will reinstate basically powers to stop and search, which were deemed to be illegal by the European Court of Human Rights. Do you think it's right that the government brings these in under cover of the Olympics?
I'm not too sure, really. I mean, I don't actually particularly agree with that, really. And the fact that they're doing it for the Olympics, that doesn't really make a difference to me. I don't think really that's well, right, really.
You know, are they just using a big event like the Olympics as a pretext for, you know, basically introducing like a security state, which we haven't voted for, have we? You know,
Maybe a temporary measure during the Olympics for that kind of thing would be appropriate, just because there'll be a huge number of people in the capital, but I wouldn't want that to be a long-term, a permanent bill.
The government is bringing in new laws, sort of anti-terror laws, under cover of the Olympics. Certainly one that will reinstate basically powers to stop and search, which were deemed to be illegal by the European Court of Human Rights. Do you think it's right that the government brings these in under cover of the Olympics?
I think the whole thing around terrorism is just a way for them to be able to add these extra security measures and control over people, and to put a fear in them so that the government are seen to be doing something useful, and at the end of it, if it is a success, they can claim it was because of all the money that they spent, and no doubt some people will be more well off after that as well.
I do find that very worrying indeed. Again, I'm afraid I didn't know anything about it, but that does concern me. I think there are quite enough anti-terrorist laws on the statute books already. I cannot see that there's any necessity or any real need for another one.
Indeed, the right to protest is being restricted as well. Some people have compared Britain during the Olympics as a police state. Is this a concern that it might have its legacy on London in the future, that certain, as it were, powers will linger?
Most definitely. Once they've put something in once, then it can give them a reason to do it again, because they can always refer back and say, well, we did it for the Olympics, or we did it for this, did it for that. So I would guess this is just the start of that type of police state in Britain, which they obviously would like to do.
You know, in a sense, people are sort of complicit. They, with this fear, people feel whatever they do is for the best. But behind it all, what are we going to end up with? You know, it's going to be pretty draconian powers, I would think.
I guess, you know, the more attention you draw to it, the more you are kind of inviting it in a way, and perhaps, you know, a more understated approach would have been a better way to deal with the situation.
You're not worried, are you, that during the Olympics there'll be no right to protest or do anything? It's a bit like being a police state, isn't it, during that period?
Yeah, I can see what you mean. I mean, I guess they don't want it to look as if there's trouble in London, and obviously last time I proved that it's not, all isn't quite right. I guess it is a bit like a police state. It is a bit different from what we're used to in what's supposed to be obviously a completely free country, right to free speech and all that.
Yeah, possibly. But like you say, you can't really comment on it. It's just until it's been and gone, because it's just too much up in the air. You know, no one knows.
That's all we've got time for this week. Thank you so much for joining us. If you've got something to say yourself, get in touch with us via the email address below. But for me, it's bye-bye for now.